Hi, my name is Jarek Malikdem. In this video presentation, I will discuss the application development workflow, which is the process we use to build an application. Creating web applications is a complicated task. You must define the problem you are solving for, plan the workflow of your web application. Web application can be designed for a wide variety of uses and can be used by anyone from an organization to an individual for numerous reasons. Here are the common tools that we are used by creating a web application, such as text editor, version control system, and web browser. Text editor is a computer program that let a user enter, change, store, and usually print text character and number. Text editor are provided with the operating system and software development package and can be used to change files such as configuration files and programming language source code. At the other end of we have IDE or integrated development environment or high-end text editor like Eclipse, Visual Studio, and Xcode. IDE is software for building application that combines common developer tools into a single graphical user interface or terminal editor. Graphical user interface, a computer program that enables a person to communicate with a computer. Terminal editor is a hardware that sustains a user interface between a user and a computer. Example of GU editor is a Coda, Sublime, Sublime Text, and TextMate. Coda provides a word processing, spreadsheet, and database function. It's a canvas that blends spreadsheet, presentation, apps, and documents together. The software can integrate with third-party services. Sublime Sublime Text is a commercial source code editor. It natively supports many program language and markup language. User can expand it functionally with plugins, typically community build and maintain under free software license. TextMate is a general purpose GUI text editor for macOS. Text editor, a system that allows user to edit text. Known text editor are the Emacs and Vim. Emacs a text editor tools that comes out of the box with Linux and macOS. Emacs also offer powerful capabilities with easy to install language support and can even help you to navigate faster in macOS with the same key bindings. Vim is the highly configurable text editor built to make creating and changing any kind of text very efficient. Installation process Sublime Text Editor. Step 1. Open download.exe file from the download folder and begin with the installation process. Step 2. Select the desired location and click on the next button to start installation. Step 3. If you want the Sublime text appear in your right-click menu, then mark the checkbox and click on the next button. Step 4. Press the installation button. Step 5. Finish with the installation process. Git Text Editor is a software for tracking changes in any set of files, usually used for coordinating work among programmers collaboratively developing source code during software development. Browser. The last application program used to interact web browser. It is essential that we know how to use effectively our browsers as a developer tool and not just a window into the internet. Example of browsers such as Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, and Microsoft Edge. Okay, our next topic is about the structure, known as the TH site structure. Site structure refers to how you organize your website's content. And websites consist of content on a variety of relatively topics presented on the post and pages. HTML or hyper markup language and CSS or cascading style sheets are the two of the code technologies for binding web pages. HTML provides the structure of the page while CSS the visual layout for a variety of devices. HTML is the most basic building blocks of the web. It defines the meaning and the structure of the web content. One of HTML main jobs is to give the text meaning so that the browser knows how to display it correctly. With HTML construct, image, and other objects such as interactive forms may be embedded into the rendered pages. Okay. Here we have the basic structure of HTML code. HTML provides a means to create structured documents by denoting structural semantics. Structure refers to the practice of using HTML and content to convey meaning and to describe how the blocks of information are structured to one another. An HTML document is mainly divided into two parts, such as head and body. Head contains the information about the HTML documents. For example, title page, version of the HTML, metadate, and etc. While the body contains everything you want to display on the other web page. HTML tags. Tags are comprised of elements and attributes. An element is an object on a page such as heading, paragraph, or image, and attributes are qualities that describe the element. Tags usually travel in pairs. An opening tag begins a section of page content and a closing tag ends it. For example, to mark up a section of text as a paragraph, you would open the paragraph with an opening paragraph tag and close it with a closing paragraph tag. P is for paragraph. The P tag defines a paragraph. Paragraphs are usually represented in visual media as block of text separated from adjacent blocks by blank lines and or first line indentation. But HTML paragraph can be an structural grouping or related content such as image or form fields. Comment tag is used to add text to an HTML document without including the text in the web page. HTML comment tags and the content they enclose are passed unchanged directly to the browser. You can use comment to explain your code, which can help you when you edit the source code at a later date. This is especially useful if you have a lot of code. Heading tag. HTML defines 6 levels of headings. A heading element implies all the font change, paragraph breaks before and after, and any white space necessary to render the heading. Heading elements are H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6, with H1 being the highest or most important level, and H6 is the least. The anchor tag is the HTML used to create a hyperlink on the web page. The A tag defines a hyperlink, which is used to link from one page to another. List tag. HTML lists are used to specify lists of information. A list may contain one or more list elements. There are three different types of lists, such as ordered list, unordered list, and description list. An ordered list start with the OL. The list item will be marked with number by default. An order list start with UL. The list item will be marked with bullets, and the description list is a list of terms with a description of each term. The Document Object Model, or DOM, is a cross-platform and language-independent interface that treats an XML or HTML documents as a tree structure, wherein each node is an objective representation representing a part of the document. The DOM represent a document with a logical tree. Each branch of tree ends in a node, and each node contains object. DOM method allows programmatic access to the tree. With them, one can change the structure, style, or content of a document. The style. In the previous topic, we've learned the structure content of an HTML document and some related models. For this video presentation, I will discuss what is CSS and why it is easy when you make style on web pages. CSS is short form cascading style sheet and is the primary language used to describe look and formatting for web pages across the internet documents of markup in general. A markup language like HTML was initially designed to provide information about formatting and looks itself, but soon became clear that it would make much more sense to split into two layers, document contents and document presentation. With CSS fulfilling the task of latter historically, that is why HTML has tags like font, color, and size locally and job that is today handled by CSS. Okay, next. Okay, CSS. Next. Okay. The anatomy of CSS rule. Okay. Hello CSS world. After discussing what is CSS is and why you should use it, you're probably eager to see it in action. If you're reading this on your web browser, then you can already see CSS doing its magic, from header colors and sizes to code sample boxes, menu list, and pretty much anything else. If this has a background, a border, and a different text size or color, then it's likely the thanks to the CSS. However, that might be a bit too complex to comprehend at the moment. So let's bring it down to much more basic level. Throughout the history of programming, every tutorial with the respect for itself has started with a hello world example, with the sole purpose of showing the most basic way to bring the text, hello world, to the user screen. This could however easily be accomplished in pure HTML without the use of any CSS, so we'll spice it up just a bit with a different color. Here's the example of code in CSS Word. Okay, the CSS rule or the anatomy of the CSS. So in the previous chapter, we used the classic hello world example to get glimpse of just it how easy it is to style an HTML element with CSS. But why did it look that way it did? In this chapter, we'll focus on the anatomy and syntax of CSS to get a deeper understanding of how it works. Let's have a look at the previous mentioned example again, where we had the CSS rule which tagged H1 element. What we have here is a selector with one property and one value. These are the core concept of CSS, and you should try to remember their names as you progress through this tutorial. In this example, H1 is the selector name, color is the property, and deep sky is the value. In between these three concepts, you see a variety of special character. There's the curly brace around the property and value. There's a colon separating the property from the value, and there's a semicolon after the value. Each of them makes it easy for the browser to praise a understand and your CSS code. The curly brace allow you to group the several properties into the same rule. The colon tells the parser where the property ends and the value starts, and the semicolon tells the parser where the value ends. This might seem a bit too complex for a simple selector, like the one we have above. But as soon as we use more complex selector names with more properties and more complex value, it makes perfect sense. Okay, formatting and white space in CSS. You may be wondering why I'm formatting the selector that way I do. The initial curly brace is on the same line as the selector name, but the ending one is on the line of its own. Properties have been indented, and there's a space after the colon, separating property and value but no before it. Why? Because that's how I like it, but the truth is the CSS parser doesn't care about the white space. Okay, next. CSS, how CSS works. CSS interpreted by the browser and then used to decide how the web page should look. This also means that while there is a very throughout specification of the CSS language, the many browser across all of the possible devices interprets your CSS code in its own way. This means that even thought most of your work will likely look and act the way you expect into. There might be subtle different in your view your work in some of many browser on the market. Since CSS is just a specification and not a law, browser vendors are free to add their own CSS properties allowing you to perform more advanced things, but only in the particular browser. This frequently used by the various vendors to try to pursue with W3 into adding functionality to the next version of the CSS specification. Historical, the problem with the rendering difference across browser have been a larger problem that it currently is, especially Microsoft has had the problem following the specification with their Internet Explorer, with version 6 being the worst example of this. Competing browser were following the specification way better, but because of market shares, developers had to implement several nasty workarounds to fully support the ITE6 and its make quick quirks, fortunately for development all over the world. Microsoft has done a lot to remedy their problems in later version of Internet Explorer. However, you will still ruin the different in rendering, especially when you test across different browser on the different devices and operation system. Your web page might not look entirely the same in Internet Explorer as it does in Chrome, and there might even be different when looked at in the Chrome on a PC with Linux, OXX, or Linux. For the reason, always test your page in a many browser. As possible, make sure that your CSS validates. Okay, how to link CSS into HTML. Already explained CSS contains information about how you mark up, should be presented to the end user. That means that two languages have to be linked together. The browser needs to know that you want to combine a piece of HTML markup with a piece of CSS code to obtain the highest level of flexibility. There are several ways to accomplish it. Inline CSS through the style attribute. Almost every HTML tag includes the style attributes, and using attributes you can specify CSS directly for the element. This defeats one of the main advantages of CSS and reusability, since CSS code applied with this technique only applies to a single element and cannot be reused for other elements. It is, however, a great way to testing out or to specify a rule which you do not expect ever to reuse. Here are the may be used. Document-wide CSS through style blocks. The second easier way to apply CSS to element in your documents in true to use of style block. HTML includes a tag called style, which can contain CSS code. Here you can define rules which can then be used all across your documents. Here's the example. Global CSS through external CSS documents. So by using the style blocks as described above, you can reuse your CSS code all over the document, but you still have to include it on all of the pages of your website, which requires the browser to download it on. Each request, instead of just downloading as external CSS file once and then catch it. This is a major disadvantage of the style blocks approach and why you should normally go for the third approach instead. A CSS file is simply plain text file saved with a .css extension and referred in the files where you want to apply the rule. If we reuse the example from the style block part, we can then move the highlights rule to a new files, and save it under appropriate name. Okay, this is the end of the report. Thank you.